Hi, okay, so this is the presentation for the 20th century authors, which is basically a presentation on the idea of modernism. So let's go ahead and just run through this background material before we get going on our first short story. Okay. Okay. All right, so the general mood of the time period, we're talking from the beginning of World War I through the end of War II, and a little bit after that. So basically in Europe, these wars caused widespread destruction and disillusionment. There was a lot of poverty, a lot of political instability, and because of all these traumas and changes, artists reacted with kind of a surge of creativity. They rejected ideas of fiction, painting, sculpting, and music in the past, and they sort of found new modern ways to create that sort of art. So one thing that binds all of these writers together is that they wanted to be novel. They wanted to change their art forms and they wanted to reinvent them. So they're very non-traditional and very experimental in their fiction writing, and they share that with other types of arts from this period. World War One. During World War One, warfare changed drastically. This is when gas warfare first became widely available. The gas warfare was insidious. Many soldiers believed it to be an immoral way of fighting a battle, but it was also very difficult, made war very difficult and much more chaotic. There were massive casualties in World War I as a result of the trench warfare and gas warfare. Also, the change in weaponry at the time. We now have machine guns that can shoot many rounds in a short period of time. And so all of that led to World War I being very devastating. And we know the aftermath of World War I, the instability from that war really is what led up to World War II. So that's why this whole period is one of great change and great instability. And the violence and the trauma of World War I and World War II is really in the background of all of these stories. So even if they're not directly about war in particular, war is always present on the fringes of the stories. Okay. All right. So one thing to note here is this unrest that occurred in Europe at the time led to the power of many fascist dictators, most notably Hitler in Germany, but also in Italy. World War II is even more widespread and more destructive than World War I. So again, war is always at the margins of these stories, even when it's not directly addressed. Okay, so this is a painting by Picasso. This is just to show you another version of art. Picasso created what was called cubism, and the idea was to not just depict reality like a photograph, but to sort of create these images and let the viewer connect with them, let the viewer decide what they mean. And cubism is a very geometric way of painting, where many times what you're looking at is one object painted from many different angles. So it promotes the idea that there's no one way to see even an object right in front of you. Okay. Okay, so Picasso, if you were going to name another artist, Cubism, different perspectives simultaneously. You can see in the painting's face here, we have her face from 2 or 3 even different angles. Okay, think about how that changes the artist's message. How would it be different if you were just to take a picture of this woman and let her be viewed in only one way? Does the painting, the way this artist chose to depict her, change your image, change your feeling about her? Other notable artists that we will discuss in detail, Igor Stravinsky. the ballet of The Rite of Spring. Okay, this was the first time that that a ballet contained really harsh discord, frightening rhythms, what they called primitive rhythms, that were very strange to audiences. And audience had never seen or heard a ballet like The Rite of Spring until its premiere in Paris one night. So we will think about, we'll listen to Stravinsky later on and talk about what your reaction is to his strange ballet. Other notable artists, Ezra Pound, the poet, he founded a literary movement called Imagism, which rejected the wordiness of 19th century poetry and sort of stripped images down to their bare bones. Okay, so this is an example of an Ezra Pound poem. The apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black bow. So stations in in a station of the metro. So again, you have to sort of decide what this means, what it could mean, without a lot of flowery language to help you interpret it. Okay. All right, modernism. This is a term where it's really the emphasis on impressionistic writing. So the characters, we sort of just get an idea of who they are without being told by an objective narrator all the facts of the characters. In fact, we have a movement away from objective narration and clear moral positions. So now we have many times multiple narrators or unreliable narrators in these stories. Again, the idea is to be experimental with storytelling, to reject old ideas of only having one reliable narrator. Okay, there's a sadness that all human interactions are subjective. We only have our own points of view and we can never really understand each other. So we're fragmented in that way. But modernists look to art for some unity. So even if we all have a different point of view, we can all look at that Picasso painting, or we can listen to the ballet of The Rite of Spring, or we can read a short story. And by sharing in the art, at least we have some unity and coherence. Art doesn't give us all the answers according to modernism, but it at least gives us that sense of meaning, sense of coherence. All right, so just for your information, after the modernist period, so later, after the 50s, this is where artists sort of say even no comfort can be found in art. Really just takes the ideas of modernism a little bit further. Okay, and this is Jackson Pollock painting, which is still actually considered part of the modernist movement, but you can see this is moving into much more experimental territory, where the painting only raises questions instead of giving answers. And everybody always says this just looks like this just looks like Jackson Pollock threw paint wildly onto a canvas, but he actually didn't do that. He actually painted on the floor and drizzled paint very carefully and purposefully all over the canvas until he got the image that he wanted. And it's sort of left up to you to decide, does this have something to do with nuclear bombs exploding, atoms being split apart? And a lot of people suggest that that might be what he was after. Maybe it's about something else. Some people even see classical symmetry in places in Jackson Pollock's work. So again, it's really, again, very much up to you to decide how you relate to a work of art, as opposed to the artist telling you what the reality is and how to interpret it. All right, important terms. Impressionism is the recreation of an experience without interpreting or moralizing. Okay, so the very first story we'll read is two characters sitting down, having a cup of coffee together. It's not clear which one of them is right, which one of them is wrong. No narrator moralizes for us. And it's not even really clear who has the better memory of the two characters, which truth is more true. It's really up to you to take what's in the story and decide for yourself. Symbolism, again, this is the use of objects or people to represent larger concepts. Okay, so that's probably a review term. And new classicism. This is the fashioning of new literature from the most vital elements of the past. So taking any classical piece of literature and redoing it in some way for a modern purpose. And we will read a modern version of the fairy tale Rumpelstiltskin. So it's taking a classic work and adapting it for modern purposes. Okay. All right. So that's it for today. Tomorrow we will get into Katherine Mansfield and our first writer of the first story, A Dill Pickle.